Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strengther, a special initiative by CXO Digital Pulse. In this series, we shine a light on the compelling tales of resilience, courage, and innovation told by women who have left a lasting mark on their industry. Our guest is marketing maverick. With a career span of over 3 decades and still going strong, she had the experience of working with organizations such as Ogilvy, Infosys, Wipro, Bajaj, and many more. For the past 14 years, she has been running her own firm, Paul Writer, a marketing advisory firm. A very warm welcome, Jessie.
Thank you so much, Pratik. So awesome to be here. And thank you to the audience as well for listening in.
Great, Jessie. And we plan to start with a rapid fire question so that our audience can know a little more about you as a person.
Sure.
Done. So starting with, so you're for digital detox. Is it necessary or do you think it's overrated?
I think digital detox would be awesome, but I personally can't do it. I think digital detox works in terms of particular apps you could take a break from. But today, you would pretty much starve if you took a complete digital detox.
Okay, it's like more like a digital devices are more like a necessary evil then.
Yeah, I don't even say it's an evil. I think just that, when books came in, people said, oh my God. When the printing press came in, they said tool of the devil. So whichever new thing comes, the previous generation will always say this is terrible, it's a tool for evil, and research will show that it's a tool for evil. But I think, it takes a little time, and this is the most rapid change we've seen. And therefore, it's really hard for a lot of people to adjust and control themselves in terms of time spent, etc. But I don't think we're going to put the genie back in the bottle. So you could take a digital detox for an hour or two, but lifetime-wise, not possible.
Okay. And as we're talking about new innovation, is there any specific innovation that you wished existed?
Yeah, because with all this talk about digital and AI and everything else, I still find that if someone sends me a request on WhatsApp, I have to manually calendar it. And then I have to integrate my two mailboxes and, and if the bill payment SMS is coming saying your cell phone is going to get cut if you don't pay, why can't AI just take care of that for me, and pay the bill? How hard is that? So I really think there is a lot of scope left for a tool which takes care of your basic operational necessities, reorders your groceries, all of that. That could be so much more frictionless.
Okay. Moving to the leadership aspect. So, what's one myth about leadership that you would like to debunk?
I think the biggest myth about leadership is that people have a stereotype of what a leader looks like and what a leader speaks like and does. And there is a belief that leaders are born, or you have to be a certain kind of person to be a leader. So even yesterday, someone came and asked me, how do you be a leader? You look like a leader. How do I become one? And nobody starts off looking like a leader. Very few people do outside of maybe sports. You just have to figure out if you want to take the risk of leadership, because there is a risk. And you also have to have a perspective that you're willing to stand by. And you have to be willing to take care of your followers, because there's no leader without a follower. So I think the biggest myth people have is that, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't study here, I didn't, achieve this, I haven't done sales, therefore I cannot be a leader. Not true. Anyone can rise to the occasion if they want to.
Great. And the most impactful trend in marketing today?
It's got to be AI. There's no other way around it. So the most impactful trend definitely right now is digital is already passé. And even today, people say, oh, I'm a leader in digital marketing. That is an anachronism. You ought to be a leader in marketing by now. There is very, very little marketing that you could do without some digital involved today. And even the purely physical event or whatever, there's a bunch of digital that runs behind it. But now if you say I'm a digital marketing leader, I'm going to expect that you know how to do AI or you're using whatever available tools are there in AI already. And if you aren't, again, very rapidly, you are going to be displaced. So there's a lot of talk of how, we can collaborate with AI. AI will be a co-worker. That is true for some
Mhm.
people. But if what you do can be replicated by a robot, trust me, these capitalist leaders are going to use that tool. So, SEO, SEM, editing, copywriting, all of these are areas that AI is going to replace. Um, the people who put it together, the people who can figure out how can you use AI in marketing, they will be around because they are still required to tell the bots what to do.
Mhm.
So I'd say the biggest trend today is that the bots are definitely coming for everybody in marketing. And if you do not figure out how to harness the power of the bots to upskill or upgrade your role, the bot is definitely taking your job, and it's not very far away. It's already happening, and you're going to see a huge change within the next 5 years because the other part is that the bots will sell to other bots. So we talked today about search engine, but if you remember my dream that somebody reads my messages and does whatever, ideally, why do I need to search, right? Because Facebook already knows that I want to go for a holiday in Thailand. That's why they spring you all those ads. But
Mhm.
why do I need to see it? Why can't my consumer bot listen to all these ads and tell me that the best possible package for your consumer preferences is this? And once I press a button, it goes and books it. So now the role of the marketer is not to advertise, but to build the algorithm that talks to the consumer buying algorithm.
And I think eventually that is something that we all are looking forward to because that would be the ultimate technology implication at a consumer level.
Correct. So today already B2B buying, even stock trading, a lot of it is algorithmic purchasing. And I think marketing would be the next step because today if you look at it and you go on NDTV, I think all the stock updates, everything is just done by the tool. It just says it's an AI tool, which is just taking machine language numbers and converting it to humanese. Why do you need the intermediary, right? If an algorithm is buying the stock, why not just say that, oh, if the stock jumps this amount, whatever, just buy it? Why do you need to tell the
Mhm.
human who clearly has lesser capacity than the AI which turned out the news?
True. Let's see how fast this technology reaches to the final set of consumers rather than getting limited to certain technical or say certain industry spaces. So Jesse,
Cannot be that. Sorry, I mean, honestly, the thing with India is that we're a very small market. It's around 100 million, whichever way you slice it. That 100 million definitely has access to AI.
true. So Jesse, moving to the last question of rapid fire, a biggest risk that you took and that paid off.
I left my Infi stock options behind and joined a startup. In retrospect, that's the most daring thing I did, and it really worked out for me.
That's great, amazing, I would say. So, Jesse, now we'll move to the main set of questions. And to start off, so throughout your leadership, you've been undoubtedly witnessed significant changes and advancement, specifically if I talk about women in the workspace. So, what factors do you believe have really contributed the most to this progression?
It's in two parts. Definitely, societal change has contributed. There is definitely a desire for women to work, which is a social change.
Mhm.
Just a generation ago, the expectation was that a woman would not go to work, and you were a outlier if you chose to go to work. And even
Mhm.
then, it would be considered economic necessity. And even then, you had a choice of what were considered safe jobs. Please be a teacher, a nurse, whatever. Let's not stress you out. So the belief was that women were fragile, needed to be protected, and it was partly real because the workplace was harsh, the society was pretty harsh. So you had to, struggle quite a bit to get to office. Maybe there was no toilet provided for you. Maybe there's no childcare. Maybe there's no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so societal change is making it safer for women to go to work, and the emergence of digital or white collar jobs is also a huge trend. And even if you say manufacturing, it is much safer health wise for women to work than it was even 30 years ago. So, 30 years ago, if you wanted to do mechanical engineering, it was actually not allowed. You could not. You had
Mm-hmm.
to go get a special exemption if you wanted to do mechanical engineering. The professors would actually sit down and tell you no, because a factory is unsafe. There were acts that prevented women on the shop floor. So, what's the point of doing engineering degree in manufacturing? So, from there to today, when it's bots and CNC machines and everything, it's a huge change. So, there is societal change. In the workplace, there has been a concerted effort to welcome women into the workforce. And again, this is driven partly by economic necessity that, women are reliable, women can do the same work, and some slightly outdated notions that women are more reliable, will stay longer. Those ideas are also there. But it's also societal change where the leadership decided that it isn't something they're doing out of charity, but something that has to be done, that women deserve financial independence. And I think if you ask me, the biggest trend that women need to embrace and society at large needs to embrace is that financial independence is a necessity for men and women. You cannot be thinking that I'll just work and I'll count on my child to support me in my old age, or I will work and I will count on the spouse to continue to support me, or I will count on my parents to continue to support me. That today will definitely put you out of sync with societal expectations. And also, because of other changes in the environment, you may find that the spouse or the father or the child or whatever is not willing to sit and support you forever, even though they agreed to at some point. So, financial independence as a requirement, a lot of women also see. And I also see a lot of older generation women supporting their daughters and daughters in law in pursuit of financial independence. So I think that's a second factor that really is driving change in the workplace. Um, and women are not perceived as so fragile anymore in many white collar industries, at least. So patriarchy continues to be there where they still try to protect women for their own good, but it's getting lesser and lesser with each generation. And the legal framework or the social framework of India has also changed to accommodate that.
Okay. And Jessie, as you have mentioned that there has been a progression, but if I go back to the time when you entered the advertisement industry, and generally the advertisement industry was perceived to be a very progressive industry. So at time, do you observed or did you experience a similar kind of biasness while working, and how was it?
So, the advertising industry was considered progressive, but not by today's norms. So, one is that if you looked at the top management of an Ogilvy and Mather in those days, there were very few women. So, there were very successful women in the industry, no doubt. But if you looked at the overall percentage, it was still male dominated as an industry. And it wasn't like the other industries where you could say, look, bottom of the pyramid, there are no women, that's why there are no senior managers.
Mhm.
But in advertising, the bottom was full of women actually. So there was no particular reason why they had not risen to the ranks. And I would say it wasn't just maybe the agency's fault, but the society's fault. So you would have probably dropped out to have kids, or you took a back seat because you didn't want to travel, or you couldn't do the midnight hours, because those days that was very common. Um, in other ways, there were non-progressive things. Like when I joined work, you could still smoke in office, and that created the smokers club, which was almost always men. So that was a little bit of a bias. Then there was a little bias in that the rules were that if you work beyond 9 p.m., you had to take a cab home, as in for your safety, you had to take a cab home. But then that adds to the cost of the account. So you didn't want women doing those meetings after 9 p.m. And it
Okay.
wasn't really the fault, I would say, of the agency or the men, but it's just that you look at your P&L and say, why am I paying for all these cabs? Let's just put men on the job. Similarly, I don't really want to support maternity leave, so I look for other ways around it. So, and even in terms of what we would now consider sexual harassment, all that was quite common in those days. You could date your boss, you could, do the appraisal of your boyfriend or girlfriend. So there were a lot of these norms which now I think women would be shocked to find out were commonplace in those days. But now, nobody thinks of that. As in, you wouldn't really expect that if your boss chose to hug you, it was okay. But agencies in those days, hugging, kissing, all that was considered the norm. And it was fine. I mean, I don't mean that people did it in a creepy way, but there were people who could misuse that liberty. And therefore, if you were a conservative woman, maybe you didn't want to join the ad agency. So there weren't a lot of guardrails and guide rails then. It was very accepting of women coming in, but I always talk about the difference between belonging and fitting in, and Brené Brown has the best definition where she says, fitting in is where I need to change myself to get accepted. Belonging is where I come as I am and hope that I can connect. So ad agencies are progressive in that you could fit in as a woman, but it still wasn't a place that you could belong. That journey has taken around 25 to 30 years.
Okay, and this was a very interesting point, and the difference that you mentioned, Jessie, that at times we, or as in generic, the difference is not that clear of fitting in and belonging because they tend to overlap, and that's where needs to be the clarification needs to be there, because just for the sake of progression, many a times that belongingness gets a backseat and fitting in gets the front seat, and post advertisement, you move in the tech marketeer space. So, in that industry, what other stereotypes have women encountered more frequently? Or were there any specific challenges or perceptions that they faced?
So, like I said, there is societal stereotypes which are across the board, across countries, whatever that remained. Women fragile, be looked after, and the world is unsafe, which is true. So we must protect you. So there is that thing. So common stereotypes in IT services industries, can women actually travel so much? So in IT services, at least then, you did have to travel a fair bit in marketing. And there was always the question of, can you handle it? Because if you had kids, it's assumed that you are the primary caretaker and therefore you cannot travel. So that was always a factor in consideration that, and similarly, if you had to be posted overseas, would your spouse accompany you? Would your kids be okay? Would your mother-in-law be okay? So those questions were asked in the interview process, which itself sort of puts a screening layer, right? And that's the kind of stereotypes that women in the industry have helped to break. So I mandated, for example, that you cannot ask a woman, are you married? Are you expecting to have children? If yes, when? So we removed those questions. In fact, we even had someone who told, like after the interview, she went to the potential hiring manager and said that, look, I just discovered today that I'm pregnant and I don't want to put you guys in a spot. So I'm letting you know. And we said that she didn't have to tell us and we shouldn't discriminate just because she told us. And we actually hired her. Now, those are the stereotypes of some sort which exist, and that is not an IT services specific stereotype. It is a Indian culture stereotype, right? The other kind of stereotype is, and again, when I first started working, and this was prior to my MBA, so prior to advertising, if you're a woman in an IT company, pretty much you were the secretary. Now, I know that today's women don't even know what is a secretary, but it was like we used to celebrate Secretary's Day and, accidentally somebody would wish me and the few other girls as well. Because it's not, when you say engineer, it's assumed engineers are men. I mean, there's nothing called, you're a lady engineer. That's a very different category then. So it was still that little bit of, are women really good at maths? Are they really going to be engineers? So those stereotypes also existed. And a lot of it, like I said, came from a slightly patriarchal mindset of let's look after women. They are fragile, they need a little looking after. So that stereotype existed. But as a corporate, I think Infosys was really, really progressive, and that was the first place I joined. And for 1998, they were super progressive, and it was very collegial. So you could actually fight back. So there was one instance where someone said that, "Hey, don't you need to go home now because your kids must be waiting?" And I remember my boss saying, "But who are you to tell me that my kids are waiting? I will take my own call. Thank you very much." So you could actually have that fight back, and and it was, like I said, the thought came from a desire to protect, not from some mean kind of a motivation. But there was also, like I said, we didn't know what was sexual harassment. We didn't know about gender diversity. That phrase itself was not really being talked about initially. So, like, there would be a department where you'd have 100 people and one woman, and no one would question that. You could just answer and say, "I'm sorry, nobody applied for the role. That's why it's like this." Today, any man who is running a department with 100, people and has one woman would be questioned, saying, "How is it possible that you couldn't find, any women?" And there would be targets for this person to meet to, make it sorted out, or at least show data saying nobody applied and you had women applicants. There's a lot of change structurally that has come into the industry, and this is across industries now. We do talk about equity, we talk about inclusivity, we talk about diversity. These are all new concepts, and I would say the IT industry was a path breaker, and it was also path breaking because of cross pollination, because we had, like, American clients already were regulated, as in they had to have some of these things in place. So they would come for meetings and ask, "Why are there no women in your management team? Why are we not seeing women in the boardroom? Why are we not seeing women in the presentation?" So the moment you ask those questions, things start to fall in place. So for this question, the one request I have for women who are in positions of economic power, like you're allowed to buy something or be a client, ask those questions to your vendors. Ask for equality. Ask for the women to show up.
And this is a very valid point, Jessie, because until unless we don't come forward in support of each other, we cannot expect the change to get initiated automatically. And as you mentioned, that it was the tech industry which was comparatively more developed as compared to others because XYZ reason. As per you, where do you think the responsibility lies to create such kind of equity within an organization?
I think the government has a lot of role to play. People don't like to hear it, but it is true. I am now on the boards of 4 listed organizations as an independent director. My first opportunity came 10 years ago when the government mandated that you have to have a female independent director on your board. I'm still the same person, but I do question whether, if that law had not come in, would organizations be so keen to have women directors? Because, hey, the status quo is great. I know some 100 men who'd like the role. Why don't I just get my buddies in? So the government also has a role to play in ensuring representation. The government also has a role to play in creating a safer environment for women to go out. So as long as it's not safe for you to, go out in the dark, there is a price for you. You have to take a cab, or the government, or the company has to provide you with a cab. And then on top of that, they have to provide a security guard for you because even the driver can't be trusted. That's not really on the business, right? If I run a business, I don't want to be paying for 3 people to escort one lady home. That's not fair to me. And there's no particular reason why it should be an environment where a woman cannot be safe at night, but a man can. So I think the government does have a serious role to play in creating a safer environment, as well as affirmative action in ensuring that companies at least do not discriminate women. So things like blind hiring are not enforced in India, where you just say that don't ask for the gender, mask the name at the time of hiring, so that the women get a similar chance. Or you can mandate that you got to have five, if you're hiring whatever 100 people, you got to have at least 50% of the applicants should be women. So the government can mandate a lot of change. They have done a bit, but some of these are more that they could do, and they could look at other countries to do that. The second is, of course, the companies themselves could look at these and see whether it makes business sense for them. Um,
Mhm.
and as a company, however, you are always going to look at your bottom line. So you have to seriously believe that there is a customer response to these initiatives. We could do it because it's a right thing to do, and you can hope that people do it because it's a right thing to do. But if there is an economic value to it, then of course more change will happen faster. Third, people have to demand it. And I don't mean women. There are way more
Mhm.
men in powerful positions than women. So we need the male allies to speak up and ask those questions of why are there no women applicants for this role? What can I do about it? Or why is it that this woman is never getting promoted? Or why is it that, in the meetings only the men speak up? So as long as, we rely on women to advocate for women, that's great, but we only hold up half the sky. What about the other half? So, male
True.
allies really have to also step up to the game and advocate for women. And not just because, the Indian thing of, oh, you are like my sister, you are like my mother. No, no, no. We don't want to be related to you. But in a professional context, ask, stand up for your colleagues. And as colleagues, not because you're like my sister.
Mhm. Okay. And Jesse, while these initiatives need to be, as you mentioned, government is the biggest trendsetter. They need to actually put these regulations or compliances in place to get the ball rolling. Apart from that, there are organizations who need to implement these changes within their environment, their mindset. Is there anything specific that women need to take a stand on while these external factors are there at place?
Well, this is an unpopular view, but you've also got to be economically viable. Um, it's you can't really cite societal problems or environmental problems or family problems as reasons why you cannot perform. Because when we're talking about a private organization, you're getting paid for work, same as everybody else. We want pay parity. And other than the differences forced by biology, which the government is supporting, I don't think you can say, look, I have to go for parent child meeting. That's why, today I have to come in late. Now, either we advocate and say that we have to have a certain amount of time for parental leave, parental time off. That's where the government springs in. But otherwise, as a woman, if you've decided to go to work, you will have to also fight society, because for example, I know that many schools like to hold parent teachers meeting in the middle of office hours, and they tend to insist the mother at least shows up. They don't insist the father shows up. So it's understood that father is busy earning money, so he cannot take leave, but mother, surely some random job she's got, she can bunk and come. So
Mhm.
we'll have to educate the school that that is not the case, and advocate and say, sorry, I mean, one is you should ask, why can't both of us come? You should mandate. The school should mandate. So there is that feeling that, life is unfair, society has unfair expectations. You will have to have the courage to negotiate that and advocate for yourself, because it's very easy to take the way out and say, oh, sorry, today, I have to do this, I have to do that. My experience has been that men often do the same thing. They will also take time off if the child is sick or something. um, and like the classical example from years ago is that my aunt worked in the school where they were promised some gift, which was if you came every day to work. If you didn't take a single day off, you got some prize, which in those days was considered a big deal. It was a ceiling fan or
Okay.
something. right? But right towards the end, so she was almost at this goalpost of getting that free gift, was when my cousin fell sick with chickenpox or something
Mm.
like that. So obviously there was expectation that mummy will stay home and look after kid. But then her husband stepped in and he was in a government job. He said, I actually have leave. I'm not going to get a prize because I went to work every day. Kid is sick, I will stay home and look after the kid while you go forth and finish the year and get the prize and all of that.
Mhm.
So this shows two things. One is the male ally came forward and enabled, the woman to go forth and work. The other is that the woman is also willing to say that, okay, it's not my duty to sit by the sick son. My husband is equally capable of doing it. So we have to look at it both ways. The third is there has to be an economic incentive for you to make that sacrifice, and for both parties. So here the husband is also in with you, he wants you to win the prize. And this is the advice I would like to leave with people, that we are expecting others to step forward and support. So we often expect mother-in-law, sister, neighbor, somebody to help us out because we're not at home. What is the upside for this person, you also have to consider. So if you're expecting your parents to look after your house, your pet, your child, whatever, remember that the money that you make, some part of it is theirs. You have to look at that as well and give them some return for this additional reward. Otherwise, it shouldn't be a downside that, oh, my, daughter or wife or whoever it is works and it's all downside for me. That should not be.
Mhm.
You need an upside for yourself.
Mm. That's true, Jesse. And this is how family is all about, because everyone have those equal role and responsibility, and they need to work as a unit rather than having it as an optional take whenever the situation comes. It shouldn't be like that. And that needs to be very well understood by both the gender, the male of the family and even the female of the family, so that she can demand and he can understand and pitch in as well. Now, as we are coming to the end of the conversation, the last question that I would like to ask is, can you share a mantra or a piece of advice that has been particularly motivational for you in general or in the times of doubt?
So I think control your variables is the biggest piece of advice that I got, which is, um, if you know that you have to do something and there are some five pieces to it, look at the variables of that and see how many can you make as fixed. So this is simple things like, if every day you're struggling to get a cab, what can you do to make sure that that is not a problem? Do you buy a car? Do you pay extra to some fellow so he shows up every day for you on time? What is it that you will do to control that variable? In the business context, a simple example is, for example, when you host an event, you don't really know how many people are going to come. Like 100 people confirmed, you don't really know if 100 are going to show up. So you have a choice of, you can't control that variable, but you can control the number of chairs that you put in the event. So if
Mhm.
you think 100 people have confirmed and I put 100 chairs and 100 don't show up, it looks like your event was a failure. But if I say, look, I can control the number of chairs, I'm only going to put 70 in there. And if 80 people come, then hallelujah, I'll put out more chairs. Wonderful. My event looks like a roaring success. So that's a simple way of managing your variables, where you try to control the bits that you can instead of wailing about all these nasty people, who didn't do what you wanted them to do because you had no control over them.
True. Definitely. Thank you, Jesse, for this really inspiring and insightful conversation. We learned various aspects of getting ensure that the success is there, be it the external factors or internal factors, the factors you can control, you cannot control. Thank you so much for being there with us, sharing experience and your thoughts. That will definitely turn as a guiding light for many of the viewers, be it the male or the females. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.